We're doing something a little different today. Today we're going to do a roster review from one of our listeners. His name's Nick, and his team needs some help. So first, we're going to go over some context around his league format, and all that. So Dak, you want to start us off with the league format here?
Yeah, so the league format, it's a 12-team, start 10, super flex, no tight end premium, 4-point passing touchdown. So right away, when you're thinking of a 12-team, you're thinking about quarterbacks. And quarterbacks are going to be more scarce, meaning they're more important because there's just less of them to go around. Yeah, so Jeff, do you want to talk about tight end premium?
Yeah, with no tight end premium, tight ends are obviously worth a lot less. Normally, receivers, wide receivers, you're looking for 8 to 10 targets a game. With tight ends, you don't really care about tight ends in this format. You're just looking for somebody that can catch a couple balls a game, occasionally get in the end zone. It's just you'd rather use your assets in other places, such as wide receiver or quarterback.
Yeah, the only tight ends that really matter here are going to be like those high end tight ends, and we will come to see that Nick does not have any tight ends period that are good, so we're not too worried about tight ends.
Mm.
He also gave us some additional context that is specific to his league, and he said that picks are overvalued in this league, which we tend to see a lot nowadays, I think, in that picks are just overvalued and that no one wants old players, especially this time of year. So that's going to be important to know that it might not be that easy to trade for picks. One last thing, this league does have kicker and defense, but we're not going to worry about that too much because they're pretty pointless. Nick, if I were you, I would urge your league to make a vote just to get rid of them. All right, so you can see his team right above us right now. It's not the best, but he does have some really solid pieces. He does have Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert and Deshaun Watson, which is a fantastic quarterback room. Running backs, he just has Brian Robinson and a bunch of just guys, that's not bad. We don't really want to have any hammer running backs because this team is not a contender. In terms of wide receivers, we do have Michael Pittman, who's someone we really do like. We also have some older guys in Evans, Diggs, and Sutton, who we're going to look to move in a minute, and his tight ends are absolutely abysmal. Want to talk about his picks real quick, Jeff?
Yeah, he's got the 112 this year and the 203, which aren't great, but it is a first and an early second, so he could work with those, maybe use it in a trade for a tier up or a tier down, or just make the picks. As again, he's in a rebuilding mode. He needs those younger players. Moving forward, he's got a decent 25 first, a bad 25 first, which when we talk about a bad 25 first, we're saying that we're looking at a contender for next year, where we look at their team roster and say, okay, this team is going to be towards the north end of the league rather than the south end. So just not that valuable of an asset as far as league context goes. And then in 26, he has his own first, which is always good to have your own first. It gives you a lot of flexibility, as well as a bad 26 first, which, as I talked about, a contender, somebody that we think should have a good team down the line.
So, Dak, what's the first thing we're going to do with this team?
So the first thing we're looking to do is to get rid of all those roster cloggers. So that's any of those tight ends that are backups or aren't really going to make an impact, and receivers that are also like backups receivers aren't going to have an impact on the game. We're going to get rid of all of those guys.
So, looking at his tight end room, we're getting rid of everyone here besides basically Daniel Bellinger and Hayden Hurst. And then in terms of wide receivers, we're only interested in keeping like 4 or 5 of these guys, right? We're keeping our Pittman as of right now. We're keeping Evans, Diggs, Sutton as of right now. We're going to move them in a minute. Someone like Parker Washington, you might be able to get a fourth for him. Maybe package Parker Washington in a fourth to get a third. Like any move you can make with those players to get better draft capital or draft capital period is a good move because those players are worthless on your team.
So we're not going to just have empty bench spots. We are going to pick up running backs off of free agency. And right now, looking at Nick's league, there's guys like Deion Jackson, Dearness Johnson, Malik Davis. These are guys that are backups at the moment, but anytime next year, they can make a spot start if the starters in that backfield get hurt. And then you can turn around, maybe flip that for a third, fourth, any draft capital we're really looking for. But you're not going to get that with any of the receivers that Nick has on his team. So you want to fill it with as many backup running backs as possible.
So on top of picking up random backup running backs that could get a spot start, quarterbacks are also somewhat valuable, especially in a 12 team league where guys last year, such as Josh Dobbs, was on waivers. People could pick him up and flip them. I flipped him for a mid second at some point based on value. Right now, there's nobody notable in Nick's league that fits this mold. But moving forward in the next couple months with draft picks coming up, people are going to be forced to drop players. So just in these types of leagues, you want to keep your eye on the waiver wire to see if there's anything valuable that hits it that you could pick up in place of some of those roster hoggers that we mentioned before.
Yeah, for every Clayton Tune, there's also an Aiden O'Connell or Brock Purdy that turns out to be a starter quarterback. So you always want to look out for those backup quarterbacks.
Yeah, so just looking at your roster construction in general, right? We're gonna want like 7 startable wide receivers. That's all we really want. We don't want any roster clogger wide receivers. No Parker Washingtons. They're never gonna see the light of day on your roster. They're a waste of space. We want like I don't know 2 or 3 tight ends at this point in a non-tight end premium. You really don't need any tight ends You need one or two that you can feel comfortable starting. Running backs right now, because we're not a contender, we want only backups. Brian Robinson's going to get gone in a couple minutes. And then quarterbacks, you have a great quarterback room, but you also want to keep backup quarterbacks in case, other teams in your league are going to need quarterbacks. And if you have someone that has a starting role for a couple weeks, you can easily trade that for a third. Easily. Maybe even a second if they're playing well like Dobbs was last year, like Jeff said. All right, Nick. So now we're going to get into some actionable moves to help your team have a brighter future. So the very first thing we're going to try to do is get your 25 first back. Now, you sent us an email saying that it's been hard to get it, but the offers you've been sending were not great. You offered the 112 for it, that got declined, and you also offered the 112 and the 203, getting back your first and the 20 and the 205. That also is just not going to get it done for him. So what we're going to do here, we're going to look at his team. He only has Joe Burrow as his quarterback. That's his only startable quarterback. You have 3 starting quarterbacks. We're not giving him Lamar. We're not giving him Herbert. But we are going to try to offer him Deshaun Watson. I think that's a fair enough move. Deshaun Watson, someone that has good upside next year. You could sell him on that. He's going to help his team score a lot more points. But also, he's your third quarterback. You can get rid of him for what could easily be the 101 if we play our cards right. Another move I'd be willing to make to get our own first back is to package, say, Mike Evans or Stephon Diggs with the 112. If they'll take that, I would do that in a heartbeat. We don't think that's the most realistic trade, but you got to send offers, right? So hopefully you got your first back. If you didn't, we're still going to move off of our older pieces just because we are not contending. I know you said in your email that you think you could maybe contend. I think what you meant is maybe get into third place. We're not really interested in getting into third place, and that being our ceiling. We want to win the league, right? So we're going to build towards the future. We're going to get rid of our old pieces to try to build a young core. So Dak, what we're trying to do, whether or not we get our first back.
Yeah. So you got Mike Evans, you got Stephon Diggs, 2 guys that are older, but they still produce. Stephon Diggs especially is going to be a hot name since he just got traded to Houston. So what we're looking to do is we're looking either to tier up at receiver or tier down at receiver. But we are going to get rid of those guys because we don't want to contend this year. We want to get those points off the team. So if you're tiering up, we're looking at maybe packaging Evans and something else for a George Pickens type. Maybe Rashee Rice, if that owner in your league is uncomfortable with that situation right now. We don't really think Rice is going to face any NFL suspension type repercussions.
We might face a small suspension, but that doesn't really change our future.
Yeah,
right?
we're still not looking to win this year. So
even
if
if
he gets
better, it's a points up for team if you get 25 first back.
So, but anyway, yeah, we're looking for that. We're looking for Pickens, Rashee Rice. If you're talking about a trade down, we're looking at Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, guys that are younger than the Evans and Diggs, and will still be fantasy relevant when it's time to contend in 2 years. Another guy to tier up for, if you can get him, is DJ Moore, where he's on keep trade cut wide receiver 19, and we have him at a consensus wide receiver 13 in our rankings. So if the owner in your league isn't really that high on DJ Moore, we get that done pretty quickly.
And when we're talking about tiering down, you're looking to get not other players, but more so picks. Like a Deontay Johnson and a second would be a great deal. Deontay Johnson, maybe even an early third, just depending on where the picks and players are based on your rankings and how you value them. You just want to make sure that when you're tiering down off players, that you're getting more pieces than you're giving up.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if people aren't valuing those old players right now, you don't have to sell them now. You can wait until August and September when people start to get excited about Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs. Maybe they're in a redraft league and they draft them pretty high and they're like, oh, these guys are going to be really good this year. They're going to help me contend. That's the time to sell them. The time is not in the middle of April when they're looking at their ages and they go, wow, they're pretty old. I don't know. You wait until August, September when their value is peak optimal time to sell.
Very well said. Other players we're looking to sell off would be Courtland Sutton and Brian Robinson. These guys are not in the same tier as Evans and Diggs, as those guys can be 16, 17, 18 points per game. Those are flashy pieces despite their age. Brian Robinson and Sutton are more mediocre pieces, but we're still looking to move them pretty much for whatever we can get. If you sell Brian Robinson in August or September, you might be able to get a second. I think you got to get a second for Brian Robinson.
All you need is him to have one good week where he scores 2 touchdowns, puts up 20 fantasy points, and somebody's going to bite.
Or in July, let's say there's some minicamp buzz about Brian Robinson. That'd be a great time to sell him too. Anytime you see a window where a player's getting talked about, I'd be looking to move any of your older players. So in terms of your future firsts, looking at 2025, you have one first that's of a contending team and one first of that not so good team. We're definitely going to hold on to the not so good teams first. That's just going to accrue value. The other first, I wouldn't be opposed to moving it if you can go get a George Pickens type for that first, because that first is going to be the 110 at best. That seems very, very stacked. So we'd be okay doing that. Also, holding on to it's also a fine move. just because it will still accrue value. And then in terms of 26 picks, you're definitely going to hold on to your 26 first, as that'll give you more versatility, more flexibility in the future. The other 26 first, we'd also be okay, once again, moving for a George Pickens, Brian Thomas, if someone's stupid enough to make that move. Otherwise, hold on to it, let it accrue value, accumulate more picks.
So now we're going to talk about the future of your team, Nick. And I know you said in your email that you're looking to contend in 3 years, but we think if you do a rebuild right, you don't have to wait 3 years. You can probably contend in 2026, but even in 2025, we think your team can be good enough. If your league pays out for third place, maybe you get some money there. Now, this is all contingent on you getting your 25 first back, but if you're able to do that, you still have two good quarterbacks. You're going to have that 25 first, which should be a pretty good pick. You have that other good first, that's also going to be a good pick. And the 2025 draft class might not be good for quarterbacks at the moment, but it is pretty rich in receivers and running backs. So you're going to get two high impact players in that draft. So you'll be a decent team in 2025, and then you have your pick in 2026. You'll have other picks that you can play around with. We think when you get to 2026, that's when you're really going to be able to take off and go for a championship run. But you don't have to wait 3 years to rebuild this entire thing. Like, if you do everything right, it's not going to take that long.
So what do we want to do? Nick has the 112 and the 203 upcoming this year. Obviously, no names attached to that pick, no draft capital yet. Lot to be seen with those picks, but as of right now, what do you think we want to do with those picks?
Yeah, I'm probably holding on to those picks just for now. We'll see what names can get to you at those picks. I'm okay trading them for younger pieces, trading them to get your 25 first. I'm okay doing that. Or making the picks and just getting some nice young assets. I'm okay with any of those three options. But yeah, probably holding on to them right now, but also willing to move them if need be, but only for young pieces. We're not buying anything old. So while we were doing the prep work for this video, Nick actually made a massive trade. So we're just gonna talk about that trade and see if we like it or not. So he ended up trading away the 101, the 106, a second and Aaron Jones for Justin Herbert, the 112 and another second, and a 25 and 26 firsts, which are the firsts that we refer to as being bad firsts because they're the best team's firsts. So how do you feel about that trade?
Yeah, on face value, I didn't really like the trade. I'm the biggest K. Williams fan, and especially in this format, he's definitely the pick at the 101. We like Herbert, but Williams is just such a special player. I have him a tier above Herbert. You're also giving up the 106, which is going to be a really good pick. I think there's a lot that could have been done with that pick. And then getting those late first back, they're not great. It's still a first round pick. And what you said earlier is that the picks in your league are really overvalued. So maybe someone could pay something really nice for that first, but I think most people are going to realize that it's a late first. So I wouldn't have done the trade personally, but you still got Herbert back in the deal, and you've got those two firsts, which are nice assets. They're all nice assets. It didn't kill your team. It's not something like where you're just screwed now. It's not a deal I would have made, but you're not screwed, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main takeaway here is that this trade, while we wouldn't have done it, did not kill your team, and you might be better off in the future because Herbert got a really nice jump in value considering his value is pretty suppressed right now. So maybe this move actually does work out for the best for you. So Nick, just know that you can email us anytime, any trades you have. We'll be happy to help. And we also want to see, where this team goes. We're excited for you in the future. Hopefully it can be a contender as early as 2026. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, Nick or anybody else, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're interested in entering for another one of these roster reviews, we're going to give away another one at 200 subscribers. So either email us, put in the comments, either way you're entered. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video.